In our last two lectures, we've been looking at the levels in our hierarchy that are above the level of the organism. So we've been talking about how organisms make up populations of all the same type of species. Populations can mix together to form communities, which are different types of species that interact in a certain geographical location. We've talked about ecosystems, which are the exact same thing as communities, only including the non-living parts of the surroundings. And we've mentioned what a biome is, that it's a larger version of an ecosystem. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, you've probably already heard the word biomes before. And even if you haven't, you can imagine what are the largest levels of ecosystems on our planet. How would you divide things up? What do you think are the main categories? If you had to pick 4 or 5, what would you call them? And which ones are near your own home? What kind of biome do you live in? So think about those things. Now, if you had to pick 5, most people talk about these 5. The aquatic biome, which includes anything that's with water. The desert biome, which you can imagine is very dry. The forest biome, grassland biome, and something called the tundra biome that's way up north, or you can imagine it also being in mountain regions. So those are the 5 that people learn about, but there are ways to divide them into far more. For example, if you get on a map, you might see 18 or more different biomes that are listed all throughout the globe. And some of those that I could just mention to you are the polar desert, which occurs on ice sheets in the North and South Poles. There's of course, tundra, but there's also the alpine tundra, which, as I mentioned, occurs in the mountains. And then just below that in the mountains would be a forest called the montane forest. So those are part of the mountainous regions of the world. There's the taiga, which is a type of forest that has some spongy, marshy quality to it and is often up in the north, just a little bit further towards the equator from the tundra. It has a lot of pine trees. That's actually, besides the aquatic biome, that is the largest biome on our planet, the taiga. There's also temperate broadleaf, which you can imagine now doesn't have as many pine trees, but has broadleaf trees. There's something called the steppe, which is what we would think of as kind of a prairie-like biome, and there's the temperate steppe and the dry steppe. Then there's the Mediterranean biome, which doesn't just occur in the Mediterranean. It's also on the coast of California, Chile, parts of Australia, and even at the tip of Africa, the southern tip of Africa. There's the monsoon affected biome, the subtropical rainforest, the subtropical dry forest, and the tropical rainforest. Those are all obviously nearer to the equator. There's the grass savanna and also the tree savanna. There's the very dry desert and the semi-dry desert. So these are just examples of how people categorize the biome level of this hierarchy that we've been learning. And there's many ways to do this. These are just some examples that I've given you. Now, as an example of how biomes are not fixed, consider the Sahara Desert. We know from news reports that the Sahara Desert is growing, and it may be in part due to human activity, the global warming and climate change that we are bringing about. But this is not obviously the first time that the Sahara has changed. For example, after the last ice age, the Sahara was actually much larger, 250 miles further south than what we have today. But then there was a period of time about 10,000 years ago when monsoon rains came, these seasonal rains, and actually made the entire Sahara Desert very lush. Then, 5,000 years ago, the monsoons changed and stopped being prevalent, and it became the desert that we know today, and actually affect human culture, forcing people into the Nile River Valley where they could still find enough water and irrigate crops. Scientists don't really know why this changed. Some say that it's due to the natural gradual change of Earth's orbit and the way it's tilted relative to the sun. and just at certain points things kind of snowball, and there's a runaway effect, and then some rains come, or vice versa. But this illustrates that biomes are in no means fixed, that they can change due to natural processes like the orbit of the Earth around the sun, or they can also change due to human factors. And the human factor is, of course, what we need to be responsible for. And as we learn about biology, we have to keep in mind that we're learning about it in part so that we can learn how to protect our environment. If you're going a little bit deeper, there's a branch called what are the main biomes we find on Earth. And that's a great place to see a map with the 18 terrestrial biomes that I mentioned. And there are other maps you can, of course, find online that show a simplified version of those 18.